Jason Rezaian, welcome to the program.
Christian, thanks so much for having me on.
So, your book has a dramatic title, Prisoner. How difficult was it to write?
Well, it went in spurts. I wrote the outcome of what happened to us and the first months of freedom, which is at the end of the book first, because it was so hard for me to kind of get myself back into that mindset of being in prison. Not that it wasn't accessible for me, but that it was pretty painful and triggering, and set off all sorts of nightmares. So it was a hard process. It took me a while to do, but I would get myself into a frame of mind where I'd dip myself back into those experiences for several weeks at a time, and then I'd need a break, and that's how I did it.
So let us sort of take our cue from you then and start a little bit at the beginning. The
Sure.
poignancy of this, there are many, many levels of poignancy, but one, that this book is an Anthony Bourdain imprint, our late friend, our late colleague, and the person who you sort of guided around Iran when he came to do a program, Parts Unknown. And he interviewed you and Yegane, your wife, in that program. And at the time, you'd sort of only just recently been there and you were quite optimistic, and it was just before your arrest. I believe it was some 6 weeks before you were arrested. Here's a little clip from that documentary.
I love it, and I hate it, but it's home. It's become home.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah, especially if this nuclear deal finally happens. Yeah, very much, actually.
I mean, I wonder how you feel seeing that's so long ago now, and so much water has gone under the bridge, including 544 days of yourself being imprisoned. Can you remember that moment when you were optimistic about a future living in Iran?
I can, and sadly, that it was violently stripped from Yegi and I very quickly, several weeks after we taped that. But I had been living there in Iran and working for several years, and I had seen the lows of 2009, 2010, the effects of sanctions on the people of that country, and also that spring of hope that happened in 2013, and the feeling that a nuclear deal with the rest of the world and a lifting of American and international sanctions would lead to a better day for Iranians. It's something that was ingrained in my mind and in my heart at the time. I could feel it was palpable, but it's, as you say, very much in the past now.
And actually, you do describe yourself a little bit, and we'll get into it later, as a little bit of a pawn in the political game around the Iran nuclear deal. But we'll get to that in a second. You described the traumas of what you went through as a prisoner. And you also say that you tried to hide that from your family. Tell me what were you going through that you didn't want them to know about?
Look, when you are thrust into such an isolated situation, your mind goes to very dark places. I was scared, I was depressed, I was very angry. But when my mother and my wife were given intermittent access to visits with me, I could not, in good conscience, make them feel any worse than they already did. While I did push them to do whatever they could to raise the awareness around my plight, raise the awareness around my case, at the same time, I tried to infuse a little bit of laughter and gentle sensitivity into each one of those meetings, because I was doing everything I could to hold on to my dignity and to my humanity, and not bring my family any further down than everybody already was.
Can I just ask you what kind of humor you were able to bring to this process, even on visiting hours?
Well, look, Christian, you've spent a lot of time in Iran over the years, and you've dealt with Iranian authorities, and you know that they don't have the most developed sense of how the rest of the world works. So there was a lot of absurdity in the questions that they asked me, and the accusations that they were making against me. It was deadly serious in the sense that they controlled my destiny, but there were funny moments, and I latched onto those with as much kind of grip as I could, because laughing through a situation is sometimes the only way to survive it. And I don't think it's weird. It's just how I've always operated.
Well, I'm going to get to some of those details in a moment. But first, you talked about your mom and your wife coming to visit you. Your mother, Mary, an American. Your father is Iranian. You are Iranian American, and you're an American citizen living in the United States. Now, your mom came on this show, and she pleaded for your release. She looked directly into the camera and spoke to the authorities in Tehran about you. This is what she said.
جیسون نه تنها پسر عزیز من هست ولی پسر ایرانم هست. کدوم مادری میتونه قبول کنه که پسرش زندانی باشه؟ پسرمون را آزاد کن.
I mean, it's actually quite emotional watching it back.
It's making me emotional right now. I mean, I'm so proud of how my mom handled that situation. My big brother, obviously, and my wife as well. Each one of them went through so many struggles around trying to free me. And my mom, not only did she, come on your show and many others to express those concerns and demand my release, she came to Tehran. She's married into an Iranian family. She'd spent a lot of time in Iran over the years. But in this very tumultuous and scary situation, she came and stuck her foot down and said, "I'm not leaving until my boy comes out," and I'll be forever grateful for that.
Yeah, and there was no messing with your mom, no messing with Mary, and she tried to get into the court, and I mean it was really painful for her because she was kept in the dark for a long, long time, and of course. They charged you with espionage, but we all know that those are trumped-up charges. What was it like? Describe, you having to defend yourself under hours and hours of interrogation in your prison cell, in these endless, trips to the kangaroo court, if I could say that, that you were subjected to. Your interrogators threatened to dismember you. I mean, they were really very violent in their words.
In the initial days and weeks, they succeed in breaking you down in a way that you feel nothing more than as if you're a scared animal awaiting another beating. It's dehumanizing in every way. But as time dragged on and the case and the awareness around my case kind of picked up momentum, I begin to feel a bit of strength and confidence, not only in the fact that I knew that I was innocent, but also that the assertions that they were making about me were not ones that the rest of the world was going to really buy into. So it made it very much easier for me to stand up for myself, especially when I was outside of the prison walls. I mean, you talk about that kangaroo court. It's the Revolutionary Court of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's got a very serious name, and the consequences are often very serious, but the process that takes place in there can't be taken seriously. It's so farcical and ridiculous. There's no evidence. You're not able to defend yourself. You're being taped for the purpose probably of propaganda, state media propaganda purposes. That I just thought to myself, here I am. I've been going through this for so long. The wind, in some ways, although there are 4 big, very towering walls around me, the wind is at my back because the world is with me.
How did you know that? Because they kept telling you that the world had forgotten about you, didn't care about you, and you talk about the absurdity of the charges. I want you to tell me the so-called avocado story.
So in the opening weeks and months, they were very adamant about the fact that nobody cared and that nobody was lifting a finger, nobody was making any noise about me. And in the confines of solitary confinement, you have no way of knowing whether or not that's true. It obviously was not true. One of the first accusations they made against me was that a failed Kickstarter project, the crowdfunding website that I had put up in 2010 with the aspiration of bringing the avocado plant to Iran, a country where you can grow almost anything, but oddly enough didn't have the avocados, give the people the right to their guacamole. This became the biggest charge against me. This was definitive proof that I had a secret spy mission. They weren't sure what it was, but it was code for something, and it was nefarious. It was one of the many things that they accused me of that obviously didn't hold any water. But as time dragged on and I was taken out of solitary, I had access to Iranian state television for a large part of the final months of my my detention. I could see the case that they were trying to make me against me in the Iranian public's eye, and I understood that that was just a response to all of the support that I was getting outside in the rest of the world. So we talked about Anthony Bourdain, we talked about my family, but there were other people too. I mean, Muhammad Ali, one of the last things that he did in life was put out a statement calling for my release.
Well, let me read it. Let me read it,
Yeah,
Jason,
please do.
because I
Please
must
do.
say I was just amazed to see this. In 2015, he said, "I'm sorry that I cannot be physically present to lend my support in person, but I pray that my words will provide relief to the efforts to secure the release of Jason Rezaian, inshallah. It is my great hope that the government and judiciary of Iran will end the prolonged detention of journalist Jason Rezaian." I mean, it is extraordinary, and that must have carried some weight. He is a famous Muslim.
Exactly. I mean, in America, we think of him as an American hero. In Iran and other Muslim countries, he's a Muslim hero. And, you know, he matters, and his words matter. I was treated differently. I was looked at differently by my guards, and the authorities in Iran were very angry about that. They wrote articles in some of the, you know, the most hardline newspapers that, you know, this great hero had been duped into supporting this spy. And, you know, they were losing a battle of public opinion at every turn. And how could I, with a little knowledge about what was going on, not have my shoulders lifted just a little bit higher, knowing that Muhammad Ali and many other prominent people were publicly demanding that I be set free?
Yes, I mean, I think that is an amazing moment. But how did your relationship with your interrogators change? First of all, did they physically abuse you?
Fortunately, Christiane, I was able to avoid being physically harmed. I think that, you know, I talk about torture, and psychological torture is a very real thing that I experienced and that my wife experienced. And it's a legacy that will live with us forever. But we were spared from being physically attacked. Over time, I took that to mean that I had some value and that they knew that they would let me go someday. But I didn't know that early on. I couldn't wrap my head around that. 544 days is a long time, and when you are in such isolation with so few characters around you, I had one cellmate for a time, and then another, and there was a revolving cast of guards who are, you know, there basically to make sure that that you're in your cell and that you know you're fed when you're supposed to be fed and taken to interrogation when you're supposed to be taken. And then you have the interrogators. It's a very few number of people that I came in contact with for a year and a half. So, you know, obviously you're going to build some relationships. And I think if you've not been in that sort of situation, it would be hard to grasp the notion that, that you're getting to know somebody. These are not people that I would actively choose to get to know, but I was forced to. And in that process, I could find out some of their weaknesses, some of their likes, ways that I could try and ingratiate myself to them. And I hope when people read the book, they understand that I was in a weird situation that no one hopes to find themselves in. And I did my best to cope with it and use the people skills that I've been able to develop over a lifetime to my advantage.
To the extent that you developed such a rapport with some of them that you ended up hugging them when you left.
I hugged one of them because he was my main adversary. He was the guy that was you know, breaking me down from day one, and it's a tormented relationship. But at the end of the day, my feeling was, you know, we've gone through this incredible ordeal that, in some ways, is a very public occurrence. You know, it's a historical moment. There was a year and a half that was talked about in the world press, and we're the two people that were on the front lines of this behind these closed doors. Not that I feel any sort of loss or missing of him, but it was the end of a very intense chapter in my life.
It's really interesting to hear what you say in this case, because one always wonders how one would behave if one was in the same situation. But I want to ask you, because you talk about the avocado tree. Now, as crazy as it sounds, you know that they have people in prison in Iran right now.
For less.
Yeah, no, well, and for climate, environmental work. And they accuse them of being spies. And there are a number of Iranian Americans in prison in Iran right now. You happen to hit the sweet spot, if I might say that there were real negotiations going on with Iran and the United States, and you were able to be released at the end of that negotiation. What are your feelings for those Iranian Americans who are in jail right now at a time when President Trump's administration is very hostile to Iran, to say the least?
My heart breaks for them and their families on a daily basis. You're right. I am the happy ending. And it took 544 days for me to be sprung from that situation. At this moment, we don't see anything happening between the U.S. and Iran that would indicate that there are negotiations going on for the people that are currently being held, Americans and also British and Canadian nationals as well. And I think that whatever you think about engaging with Iran and what the Obama administration did in terms of negotiating with Iran, without an open channel to discuss these cases, and I would call them all hostage cases. Some people would say to me that you don't know if these people that are being held in Iranian prisons are innocent or not. Well, based on anecdotal evidence that I experienced myself, I'm going to say that these people are innocent until they're proven guilty, and not one of them has been proven guilty of any crime. So until there is a process of negotiation set up to bring these people home, I don't see any way that they're going to come home, and I believe that they're all being held as leverage for some future concession.
Let me just play.
Just as I was.
Indeed. Let me just go back to when you were released. You came back to the Washington Post in Washington, and you were welcomed by members of your colleagues there. Here's a little clip.
Probably a week or so after Jason got back, he came to the Post.
He walked in the building, and it was a hero's welcome.
I think everyone was just on the verge of tears the whole time. And Jason stood up.
My Iranian interrogators told me that the Washington Post did not exist, that no one knew of my plight, and that the United States government would not lift a finger for my release. Today I'm here in this room with the very people who helped prove the Iranians wrong.
Well, it is, again, very emotional and very relevant to what we were just talking about. You saw Secretary of State Kerry prominent in that clip, and of course he spent as much time as he could with his counterpart Javad Zarif trying to negotiate your release, which did happen in conjunction with the end of the conclusion of this Iran nuclear deal. So let me ask you how you feel now. You say that you've been changed, that you indicated at the beginning that you still have nightmares. How have you changed?
I think that physically I'm different. The shape of my body is not exactly what it was when I went in. I went through a rapid weight loss in a very harsh set of circumstances. I've got aches and pains that probably won't go away. Respiratory issues that have persisted in the 3 years since I've been out. But more than that, it's difference in my brain functions, my sensitivity to light and sound, my anxiety in confined spaces, my confusion in crowds. These are all things that are very normal for somebody who has experienced a long sustained period of trauma, but not normal for me and the inner workings of my own brain that existed before all of this. So, it's a constant process of re-getting to know myself. But I think I'm doing pretty good at it at this point.
Well, and by the looks of your book, you are doing pretty good. Well, we send you all our support and thanks. You're a colleague, And we are very, very pleased to see that you are free and you are writing and you're telling the world your story. Jason Rezaian, thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for your support of press freedom and me.